The sun cast long shadows across the dusty road as Marcus Reeves checked his rearview mirror for the third time in as many minutes. Old habits. Always checking. Always aware. The heavy supply truck rumbled beneath him, its suspension groaning over each pothole and ridge of the neglected mountain highway. To his right, the terrain dropped sharply into a sprawling valley cut by a winding river, its waters reflecting the golden afternoon light. To his left, sheer rock faces rose like natural watchtowers. Perfect ambush territory. His mind cataloged this thought automatically. Just a delivery man now, he reminded himself, the words barely audible over the engine's steady growl. Yet his eyes continued their practiced scan, ridgeline to valley floor, noting every deviation, every potential vantage point. 8 years removed from his last deployment, but the ranger in him remained vigilant. His radio crackled to life. "Marcus, you past Devil's Elbow yet?" The voice belonged to Ellie Sandoval, proprietor of the general store in Cielo Vista, the remote border community that had become both his home and purpose these past 3 years. 20 minutes out, he responded, voice steady and deep. Medical supplies intact. Some delay at the checkpoint, but nothing serious. Thank God. Ellie's voice softened with relief. Doc Jensen's been calling every hour. Marcus nodded to himself. The insulin was 3 days late already, no fault of his, but the supplier in El Paso had inventory issues. For the diabetics in Cielo Vista, these delays weren't just inconvenient, they were potentially life-threatening. Out here, 80 miles from the nearest hospital, his deliveries weren't luxury, they were lifelines. The truck rounded another bend, and Marcus slowed instinctively. A cluster of boulders had fallen onto the shoulder, recent, judging by the dust still settling and the fresh scrape marks on the asphalt. His eyes narrowed, scanning the ridgeline above for movement. Nothing visible, but something felt off. He accelerated slightly, right hand dropping to rest near the holstered Glock 19 hidden beneath his seat. The weapon wasn't strictly necessary for delivery runs, but after 20 years, 12 in Army Rangers, 8 in private security, being unarmed felt like going outdoors without shoes. The radio crackled again. "Marcus." Ellie's voice carried an edge of concern. "Still here," he replied, eyes still surveying. "Just navigating some debris. Tell Doc I'll be there." The town of Cielo Vista came into view as he descended into the valley, a scattered collection of weathered buildings nestled against the protective embrace of the mountains. Population 342, according to the faded sign that had greeted him when he first arrived. 3 years ago, he'd planned to stay a week, just passing through on his way to somewhere else, anywhere else. Something about the place had anchored him, perhaps the quiet, the space to breathe after too many years in war zones. Or perhaps it was the people, who asked few questions but offered genuine gratitude for his presence. The first time he'd intervened, stopping a bar fight that threatened to turn deadly, the sheriff had simply nodded at him afterward. "Military?" he'd asked. "Army." "Rangers," Marcus had replied, expecting the usual follow-up questions. Instead, the sheriff had simply extended his hand. "Tom Garza, Vietnam. We respect privacy around here, but we welcome the skills." That handshake had marked the beginning of his acceptance. Within months, he'd started the supply runs, leveraging contacts from his security days to ensure the isolated community received consistent deliveries of everything from medicine to mechanical parts. The big companies wouldn't service Cielo Vista, too remote, too small, too unprofitable. Marcus filled the gap, charging only what he needed to cover costs and keep his modified F-250 running. His father would have approved. Staff Sergeant James Reeves had raised him on stories of duty extending beyond the battlefield. "The uniform comes off, son, but the responsibility doesn't," he'd say. His father had died 5 years ago, lung cancer, likely from burn pit exposure during his own service, but his words remained Marcus's compass. The truck bounced over a cattle guard, bringing him back to the present. He rolled through the outskirts of town, passing Luis Morales' auto shop. The mechanic looked up from under the hood of an ancient pickup and raised a greasy hand in greeting. Marcus returned the gesture with a nod. 10 minutes later, he was backing the truck up to the loading dock behind Ellie's store. The petite, silver-haired woman was already waiting, clipboard in hand and reading glasses perched precariously on her nose. "Doc Jensen's pacing a hole in his clinic floor," she said by way of greeting. "I told him you'd deliver his supplies first." Marcus nodded, already unlatching the truck's rear doors. "Makes sense. The rest can wait." He pulled out a reinforced medical cooler, checking the temperature gauge before handing it to Ellie. "Insulin's in here. Everything else for the clinic is in these 3 boxes." As he lifted the first box, a flicker of movement across the street caught his attention. A black SUV with tinted windows, parked at an unusual angle, 2 men inside. Not locals. His mind photographed the vehicle, noting the Chihuahua license plate and the distinctive antenna configuration. "New visitors?" he asked casually, nodding toward the vehicle. Ellie's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Showed up yesterday. Been driving around, asking questions about delivery schedules." Marcus absorbed this information silently, loading the remaining boxes onto Ellie's dolly with careful precision. "I'll drop these at the clinic," he said, "then come back for the store inventory." 15 minutes later, he was helping Doc Jensen unpack the critical medical supplies. The doctor, a retired Army medic who'd served in the First Gulf War, worked with focused efficiency. Cutting it close this time, Jensen remarked, though there was no accusation in his tone. "Supply chain issues in El Paso," Marcus explained. "Had to wait for the shipment." Jensen nodded, organizing vials of insulin in the small refrigerator. "Noticed anything unusual on the road?" he asked, voice deliberately casual. Marcus paused. "Such as?" Sheriff mentioned increased traffic. "Vehicles that don't belong. Some of the ranchers reported trespassers." "Black SUVs with Chihuahua plates?" Marcus asked. Jensen's shoulders tensed slightly. "Among others. Tom thinks it might be Los Aguilas testing boundaries." The name registered immediately. The Los Aguilas cartel had been expanding territory over the past year, moving beyond drug trafficking into control of transportation corridors. Marcus had heard whispers during his supply runs, reports of remote communities being isolated, then exploited. "The sheriff have a plan?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice neutral. Jensen's laugh held no humor. "Tom's got 3 deputies for a county bigger than Rhode Island. Border patrols stretch thin. We're largely on our own out here." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus said nothing, but his mind was already calculating, assessing. The terrain around Cielo Vista offered both vulnerability and advantage. Defensible positions, limited access roads, natural choke points. His ranger training categorized these features automatically. "Not your problem," Jensen said finally, misreading Marcus's silence. "We've weathered tough times before." Marcus nodded, but something had shifted internally. This place had given him purpose when he'd needed it most, offered community without demands. These people, Ellie, Jensen, Sheriff Garza, Luis the mechanic, and dozens of others, had become his people. That evening, after completing his deliveries, Marcus drove to his modest cabin 3 miles outside town. The structure was simple: 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a kitchen, but he'd reinforced the walls, installed security lighting, and maintained clear sightlines in all directions. Old habits again. He sat on the front porch, cleaning his Glock with practiced movements while watching the sunset paint the valley in crimson and gold. His mind replayed the day's observations: the black SUV, Jensen's concerns, the fallen rocks on the mountain road that might not have been an accident. His satellite phone buzzed. The display showed a familiar name: Mike Danvers, former ranger, now working border security 50 miles west. "Reeves," he answered. "Marcus." Mike's voice was tight. "Thought you should know. We're tracking increased Los Aguilas movement in your sector." They've been systematically targeting supply lines to remote communities. Starve them out, then move in offering protection. Marcus's jaw tightened. I've noticed some surveillance. Thought it might be them. It's confirmed. Our intelligence suggests they're particularly interested in medical supply deliveries. Mike paused. Your deliveries. The implications were clear. Marcus thanked his friend for the warning before ending the call. Inside his cabin, he moved to the spare bedroom that served as both office and armory. A locked cabinet contained reminders of his previous life, an M4 carbine, customized for accuracy and reliability, a Remington 700 sniper rifle, several handguns, and tactical gear accumulated over years of service. He hadn't anticipated needing these tools again, not here in this peaceful valley. Yet as he ran his hand across the rifle case, memories surfaced, not of violence, but of purpose, of standing between harm and those who couldn't protect themselves. 3 days later, Marcus was conducting reconnaissance of his own. He'd mapped the movements of the suspicious vehicles, identified 4 different SUVs rotating through surveillance positions along his delivery routes. They were professional but predictable, establishing patterns that revealed their intentions. From a concealed position on a ridgeline, he observed 2 men photographing the western access road through high-powered lenses. Through his own binoculars, he studied their equipment, their posture, their weapons partially concealed under light jackets. Not street thugs, these were trained operatives with military precision. The sight triggered a flashback. Afghanistan, Hindu Kush Mountains, his ranger unit tracking insurgent movements through similar terrain. His spotter, Rodriguez, whispering coordinates as they logged enemy positions before the operation. The weight of responsibility for his team, knowing that missing any detail could cost lives. He blinked away the memory, refocusing on the present threat. These men weren't insurgents, but their purpose was similar: control territory, isolate the population, establish dominance through fear and necessity. That night, he spread topographical maps across his kitchen table, marking observed cartel positions with red pins, likely staging areas with blue. The pattern was clear. They were establishing a perimeter around Cielo Vista, focusing on the supply routes. His routes. A knock at the door interrupted his planning. Sheriff Garza stood on the porch, hat in hand, expression grim. They hit Luis's cousin yesterday, the sheriff said without preamble as Marcus invited him in. Delivery truck bringing construction materials from Sierra Blanca. Drivers in the hospital. Truck and supplies gone. Marcus nodded toward the map. They're isolating us. Looks that way. Garza studied the marked positions. You've been busy. Gathering information, Marcus replied. Knowledge is advantage. Garza's weathered face creased with a humorless smile. That's why I'm here. Man with your background. Figured you might have insights. There was a deeper question beneath the sheriff's words. Marcus recognized it immediately, not just asking for information, but for commitment. Asking if Marcus considered himself truly part of this community or just passing through. I make another supply run in 3 days, Marcus said finally. Medicine again, plus food staples. Route takes me through Devil's Canyon. The sheriff's eyes widened slightly. That's where they'll hit, if they're watching patterns. Marcus nodded once. Yes. Understanding passed between the men. The sheriff examined the map again, noting the terrain features of the canyon, the natural choke points, the elevated positions, the limited escape routes. Seems like a dangerous place for an ambush, he observed carefully. For everyone involved. It can be. Marcus agreed, his voice betraying nothing of the plans already forming. Especially if you don't know the terrain. The sheriff studied him for a long moment before nodding. I can have deputies. No. Marcus cut him off gently. The town needs your protection. This is something I need to handle alone. After the sheriff left, Marcus returned to his planning with renewed purpose. The calculations were familiar: terrain assessment, resource inventory, contingency development. The years of training resurfaced, not as trauma, but as tool. In his closet, pushed to the back behind everyday clothes, hung his old combat gear. Reinforced plate carrier, tactical belt, specialized clothing designed for both protection and freedom of movement. He ran his fingers across the faded name tape. Reeves. His father's voice seemed to echo in the quiet room. The test isn't whether you wear the uniform, son. It's whether you live its purpose. The following morning, Marcus drove into town for breakfast at the local diner, maintaining his regular routine despite the weight of his developing plans. He took his usual corner table, positioned to view both the entrance and the street beyond. Maria, the owner's daughter, brought coffee without being asked. The usual? She asked with a warm smile. Please, he nodded, returning the smile briefly before his attention shifted to the black SUV, cruising slowly past the diner. Different vehicle, same purpose. They were watching, learning his patterns just as he was learning theirs. Sheriff Garza slid into the seat across from him 10 minutes later. They're getting bolder, he said quietly, nodding toward another unfamiliar vehicle parked across the street. 2 more showed up at dawn, like they're making a statement. They are, Marcus confirmed, establishing psychological dominance before physical confrontation. Standard intimidation tactic. The sheriff's coffee arrived, and they paused while Maria set down plates of huevos rancheros. When she left, Garza leaned forward. Communities noticed. People are scared, Marcus. They should be cautious, Marcus corrected. Fear is the goal. Don't give them that victory. They ate in thoughtful silence until the sheriff spoke again. What do you need from me? The question was simple, direct, one professional to another. Marcus considered carefully. 3 days. Keep people in town, away from the canyon road. If you hear anything, don't respond immediately. Give it time. The sheriff studied him, then nodded once. Medical supplies are critically needed. Be a shame if anything happened to delay them further. The conversation shifted to mundane topics as they finished breakfast, but an understanding had been established. 3 days to prepare. 3 days until the canyon. That afternoon, Marcus drove his personal truck along back roads, avoiding main routes where he might be observed. He stopped at 3 predetermined locations, natural caches he'd established months earlier out of habit rather than immediate necessity. At each location, concealed from casual observation, he checked and supplemented equipment he hoped never to need: communications gear, first aid supplies, tactical tools. The final cache, hidden in a dried riverbed accessible only by a game trail, contained additional weaponry, a backup in case of catastrophic scenarios he'd calculated but never expected. Old habits, always preparing, always ready. That night, alone in his cabin, he studied satellite imagery of the canyon, committing every feature to memory. The narrow passage with sheer rock walls, the dried creek bed offering concealed movement, the elevated positions providing commanding views, the remnants of an abandoned mining operation, its collapsing tunnels creating a maze of potential cover. As he planned, a separate part of his mind reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the eager young recruit following his father's footsteps, to the hardened ranger leading operations in hostile territory, to the disillusioned veteran seeking quiet and distance after too many deployments. And now this, preparing once more to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd come to this remote valley seeking peace, only to find himself drawing once more on the skills honed in war. But this time, the stakes were personal. This wasn't about abstract geopolitical objectives or following orders. This was about Ellie and Doc Jensen, about Luis and Maria and Sheriff Garza, about a community that had accepted him without demanding his story. This was about home. Dawn broke over the eastern ridges, bathing the valley in pale golden light as Marcus completed his 3rd circuit of the perimeter road. He'd been driving since 4 a.m., using the pre-dawn darkness to observe without being observed. His truck's lights remained off, navigation guided by memory and moonlight. The night had revealed much. For unfamiliar vehicles stationed at strategic points along the supply routes, men changing shifts at precise 3-hour intervals, radio communications using encrypted channels, The operation bore hallmarks of military precision rather than typical cartel chaos, disciplined, patient, methodical. Marcus parked on a secluded overlook, engine off, and raised his binoculars. In the growing light, he could make out two men establishing a new observation post on the ridgeline above the eastern access road. Their movements were efficient as they unpacked surveillance equipment and a communication array. One carried himself with the distinctive posture of formal military training. The other moved with the hypervigilance of someone accustomed to urban combat. His satellite phone vibrated against his hip. Mike Danvers again. They've moved up their timeline, Mike said without preamble. Border Patrol intercepted communications. Los Aguilas is establishing hard control of transportation corridors by end of week. Marcus watched as the men on the ridge calibrated what appeared to be a high-powered spotting scope. They're already here, setting up observation posts, tracking movement patterns. That tracks with our intelligence, Mike confirmed. Cielo Vista's on their priority list. Strategic position controlling 3 valley access routes. Why now? Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. New leadership, Mike replied. Commander named Vega, ex-Mexican Special Forces, brings military discipline to cartel operations. Word is he's making an example of communities that resist. Marcus absorbed this information silently, mind calculating implications. Anything else I should know? Yeah, Mike's voice tightened. They've identified you specifically as a target. Your supply runs are keeping Cielo Vista independent. Vegas sees that as a challenge to his authority. After ending the call, Marcus remained motionless, processing. Being identified elevated the threat. No longer was this just about disrupting supply lines. It had become personal. The cartel had marked him, which meant they'd studied him, perhaps knew about his background. He started his truck and drove toward town, mind shifting to immediate security protocols. Moving with deliberate casualness, he took a circuitous route, watching for tails, noting a black SUV that maintained consistent distance 3 turns in a row. Confirmation of surveillance. Cielo Vista was quieter than usual when he arrived. The normal morning bustle seemed subdued, residents moving with heightened awareness, conversations hushed. Word had spread. Fear was taking hold, exactly as the cartel intended. Marcus parked behind Ellie's store and entered through the loading dock. The older woman looked up from inventory sheets, her normally cheerful expression strained. Luis's cousin died this morning, she said without greeting. Hospital couldn't stop the internal bleeding. Marcus nodded grimly. Escalation. Message sending. I'm sorry. Sheriff says they're watching the town. Watching you. Her voice remained steady though her hands trembled slightly. Everyone's talking about it. People are scared, Marcus. I know. He kept his voice calm, reassuring. But fear is their weapon. Don't give it power. She studied him for a long moment. You're not surprised. Or scared. I've seen this before, he acknowledged. Different places, different players. Same tactics. In the war? Her question was direct. He nodded once. And after? Private security contracts in contested territories. This playbook isn't new. Isolate, intimidate, dominate. Ellie's shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly. What do we do? For now, maintain routines. Don't show disruption. He paused. I have another supply run scheduled for tomorrow. Medical necessities can't wait. Alarm flashed across her features. They'll be watching. Luis's cousin. I know the risk, he interrupted gently. But diabetics need insulin. Doc Jensen needs antibiotics for Maria's father. Some things can't be delayed. Understanding passed between them. Ellie had lived in this valley for 67 years, weathered hardships from natural disasters to economic collapse. She recognized resolve when she saw it. There's something else you should know, she said finally. Sheriff Garza called an hour ago. Roadblock on Highway 16. Men checking vehicles, turning some back. Marcus processed this development. Controlling access. Establishing authority. How far out? Junction point, about 40 miles east. She hesitated. They're letting some traffic through. Selectively. Strategic. Testing boundaries while avoiding direct confrontation with law enforcement. Classic insurgency tactics: establish presence without triggering immediate response. After leaving Ellie's store, Marcus drove to Sheriff Garza's office. The small brick building housed the entirety of Cielo Vista's law enforcement, the sheriff and 3 deputies responsible for nearly 2,000 square miles of rugged terrain. Garza was on the phone when Marcus entered, his weathered face tight with controlled anger. He ended the call with a curt, "Keep me informed," before acknowledging Marcus with a nod. "Border Patrol," he explained. "They've got reports of similar roadblocks across 3 counties. Unofficial checkpoints. Selective vehicle searches. Testing response thresholds," Marcus observed, "seeing how much they can get away with before authorities react." The sheriff nodded grimly. "And we're stretched too thin to do much about it. BP's focused on the border itself. State police have manpower shortages. We're low priority." Marcus studied the large county maps spread across Garza's desk, mentally overlaying the cartel positions he'd observed. They're establishing a perimeter, controlling who and what enters the valley. "I've got 1 deputy at our eastern checkpoint," Garza said. "But he reports vehicles bypassing, using ranch roads. We can't cover all access points." "You need to consolidate resources," Marcus advised. "Protect the town core. Don't spread your people thin trying to control territory you can't hold." The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly. "Speaking from experience?" "Afghanistan. Kunar Province." Marcus's voice remained neutral, professional. "Similar situation, insufficient forces to control territory against determined opposition. Focusing defensive resources on population centers proved most effective." Garza studied him with newfound understanding. "You weren't just any soldier, were you?" Marcus met his gaze evenly. "Army Rangers. Special Operations. 12 years. The sheriff absorbed this information silently before returning his attention to the map. "Any other professional insights you'd care to share?" "They want control without confrontation if possible. Direct conflict attracts attention they don't need yet." Marcus traced a finger along the canyon road. "They'll likely hit my supply run tomorrow. Isolated area, limited witness potential, message sending opportunity." "And you're still going?" Garza asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "I could deputize you. Make it official." Marcus shook his head. "Better if I remain civilian. Gives you deniability if things escalate." Understanding passed between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that Marcus was preparing for scenarios beyond simple self-defense. Garza nodded once, accepting the boundary. "At least take a radio," he insisted, pushing a department-issue handset across the desk. "Emergency channel is monitored 24/7. Marcus pocketed the radio with a nod of thanks. As he turned to leave, Garza added, "Be careful, Reeves. These aren't ordinary criminals. Los Aguilas recruits ex-military. Their tactical teams train like special forces." "I know," Marcus replied simply. "So did I." Late that afternoon, Marcus drove to the canyon, ostensibly checking road conditions before tomorrow's supply run. In reality, he was conducting final reconnaissance, memorizing terrain features that could provide tactical advantage or vulnerability. The canyon stretched nearly 7 miles, its walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. The Tulane Road wound through its center, following the path of least resistance carved by ancient water flows. In 3 locations, the passage narrowed dramatically, creating natural choke points where vehicles would be forced to slow. Perfect ambush territory. Marcus stopped at each choke point, studying sight lines and fields of fire. His mind automatically calculated distances, angles, cover options, the mathematics of survival he'd internalized through years of combat operations. At the canyon's midpoint, where the walls pinched closest together, he noticed fresh tire tracks leaving the main road, disappearing into a narrow side passage. Following instinct, he parked and continued on foot, moving silently across the rocky terrain. The tracks led to a concealed position overlooking the road, a natural stone alcove providing both cover and commanding view of the canyon floor. Shell casings glinted in the dirt. 9 mm. Recent. Someone had been conducting shooting drills, establishing range calculations. They were preparing too. As Marcus carefully documented the position, movement flashed in his peripheral vision. Dropping to a crouch, he eased behind a boulder, becoming still as stone. Voices carried on the slight breeze, Spanish, but with the distinctive cadence of tactical communication. 2 men emerged from another side passage 50 yards away, carrying equipment cases toward a black SUV hidden among the rocks. Through his compact binoculars, Marcus studied them. Both wore civilian clothing but moved with military bearing. One carried a scoped rifle case with practiced familiarity. The other spoke into a handheld radio, gesturing toward the canyon road. Advance team. Setting up positions. Confirming fields of fire. Marcus remained motionless until they departed, memorizing faces, equipment, vehicle details. Only when the sound of their engine faded did he retrace his steps, leaving no evidence of his presence. The encounter confirmed his assessment. Tomorrow's ambush was not speculation but certainty. The cartel had selected their ground, prepared their positions. They expected a routine delivery driver, vulnerable and unprepared. What they would get was something else entirely. By sunset, Marcus had returned to his cabin to prepare. On his kitchen table, he spread the contents of his go bag, equipment maintained for contingencies he'd hoped never to face again. Tactical clothing designed for mobility and concealment. Medical supplies for combat trauma. Communications gear operating on frequencies unlikely to be monitored. From his gun safe, he retrieved the M4 carbine he'd carried through 3 combat deployments. The weapon was meticulously maintained despite years of disuse. Its familiar weight, both burden and reassurance. He conducted function checks with practiced precision, muscle memory guiding his hands through procedures repeated thousands of times during his service. Next came mission-specific preparations. His truck needed modification, reinforcement at vulnerable points, supply organization for rapid access, emergency equipment secured against sudden movement. Working methodically through the night, he transformed the vehicle from civilian transport into operational platform. Dawn found him completing final preparations, mind focused on the mission parameters he'd defined. Primary objective: ensure critical medical supplies reached Cielo Vista. Secondary objective: disrupt cartel operations without escalating to full confrontation. Acceptable risk threshold: significant personal exposure if necessary to achieve objectives. The parameters felt familiar, reminiscent of mission briefings during his Ranger operations. The difference lay in authorization. No commanding officer had issued these orders. No team awaited his leadership. This decision was his alone, the responsibility his to bear. As morning light spilled across the valley, Marcus drove to Doc Jensen's clinic to collect the most critical medical supplies. The doctor was waiting, expression grim, as he helped load temperature-sensitive medications into specialized containers. "Sheriff mentioned you might have trouble on the road," Jensen said, securing the last container. Marcus nodded. "Possibility. That's why we're prioritizing essentials. These go through no matter what." The doctor studied him, medical professionals' eyes noting the subtle changes in Marcus's demeanor, the heightened alertness, the controlled precision of movement. "You're expecting more than trouble, aren't you? Hope for the best. Prepare for alternatives." Marcus checked the secure loading of the supplies. "Either way, these medications will reach Cielo Vista today." Jensen's weathered hand clasped his shoulder briefly. "Be careful, son. We need these supplies, but we need our supplier too." By mid-morning, Marcus had cleared the town checkpoints, his truck loaded with critical medical deliveries. Sheriff Garza stood at the eastern perimeter, radio in hand, expression somber. "Last chance to reconsider," the sheriff offered. "We could try coordinating with Border Patrol, request additional. Bureaucracy takes time." Marcus interrupted gently. Diabetics don't have that luxury. He nodded toward the truck. Insulin in the primary cooler. Temperature critical. Needs to reach Jensen within 6 hours. Garza understood the message behind the practical details. If Marcus didn't return, the supplies still needed to be recovered. Canyon route. Most direct, Marcus confirmed. I'll radio status updates at checkpoints Alpha through Delta. The naming convention wasn't lost on the sheriff. Military terminology. Operational protocol. Garza simply nodded. Good luck. The first 30 miles passed without incident. Marcus maintained standard speed, observing normal driving patterns while remaining hyper-aware of his surroundings. Twice, he noted vehicles pulled off on side roads, positioning observers tracking his progress. He cataloged their locations mentally, updating his threat map. Approaching the canyon entrance, he keyed the radio. Alpha point clear. Sheriff Garza's acknowledgement came immediately. The canyon walls rose around him, embracing the road in shadow despite the late morning sun. Marcus felt the familiar calm of imminent action settling over him. The heightened awareness coupled with emotional detachment that had served him through countless combat operations. 10 minutes into the canyon, he spotted the first confirmation of ambush preparation. A vehicle concealed among boulders on the high western ridge, glint of optics tracking his movement. Observation post, likely coordinating with ground elements ahead. Bravo point, he reported via radio. Conditions nominal. The coded message would alert Garza to the first confirmed threat sighting without revealing specific information if communications were being monitored. The canyon narrowed as he approached the first major choke point. Here the road bent sharply around a massive rock outcropping, forcing vehicles to slow significantly. Marcus scanned constantly, noting fresh scuff marks on the canyon floor where someone had recently positioned themselves. The ambush would come soon. He reached beneath his seat, fingers finding the concealed radio transmitter he'd prepared the previous night. A single button press activated the device, which began broadcasting a continuous signal on specific frequencies, a signal designed to interfere with certain types of remote detonators. The truck rounded the bend, and Marcus immediately identified the ambush configuration, vehicle positioned diagonally across the roadway, creating partial blockage. 3 armed men taking coverage positions. 2 more on the ridgeline above with overwatch capability. Standard checkpoint procedure, likely intended to stop the vehicle for inspection before escalating to direct confrontation. The men wore civilian clothing but handled themselves with tactical discipline. Weapons visible, but not directly aimed, yet. Marcus slowed the truck, giving every appearance of compliance while mentally executing final preparations. His M4 remained concealed but accessible. Secondary weapons positioned for contingency response. Medical supplies secured for rapid extraction if necessary. The lead figure stepped forward, hand raised in the universal signal to stop. Marcus brought the truck to a halt 30 yards from the blockade, outside effective shotgun range, but well within his own response capabilities if needed. Medical delivery for Cielo Vista, he called through the open window, voice calm and professional. Time-sensitive insulin transport. The man approached, hand resting near the pistol at his waist. Late 30s, muscular build, movement patterns suggesting formal training. Road closed, he announced in accented English. Security checkpoint. I have authorization from Sheriff Garza, Marcus responded evenly. Medical necessity. The man's expression hardened slightly. New authorities in this territory. Los Aguilas controls access now. Confirmation. Direct statement of territorial claim. Escalation from observation to assertion of authority. These supplies are needed urgently, Marcus persisted, maintaining the role of concerned but cooperative civilian. I'm just the delivery driver. People will die without this medication. The man studied him, eyes calculating. Step out of the vehicle. We need to inspect the cargo. Marcus complied slowly, movements deliberate and non-threatening as he exited the truck. The men on the ridgeline adjusted their positions slightly, maintaining overwatch as their colleague approached the truck's rear doors. Medical supplies only, Marcus explained, opening the cargo area to reveal the clearly marked containers. Temperature sensitive. Need to maintain cold chain. The man examined the containers without touching them, then spoke rapidly into a handheld radio. Marcus caught enough Spanish to understand he was reporting to a superior, requesting instructions. The response came immediately, voice crackling through the radio with unmistakable authority. The man's demeanor shifted subtly as he returned his attention to Marcus. "You are Marcus Reeves," he stated rather than asked. "Former military. Current supply contractor." Not a question. Confirmation they had identified him specifically. "Just a delivery driver," Marcus maintained, expression neutral despite the internal alertness now ratcheted to combat readiness. "These supplies are needed in Cielo Vista. Commander Vega wishes to speak with you," the man continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken. "Establish proper business relationship. Escort required." Marcus noted the subtle repositioning of the other man, adjusting angle of coverage, preparing for potential resistance. The situation was evolving from checkpoint to detention operation. "Happy to meet with your commander," he replied, voice remaining reasonable. "After these medical supplies are delivered, lives depend on them." The man's hand moved fractionally closer to his weapon. "The supplies will reach their destination after inspection at our facility. You will come now." Decision point. Marcus calculated options, risks, consequences. Direct confrontation here would endanger the medical supplies. Unacceptable given the primary mission objective. Compliance would surrender tactical advantage, but might preserve opportunity to complete delivery. "I need to inform Sheriff Garza of the delay," he said, reaching slowly toward his pocket where the police radio was visible. "Medical protocol." The man's eyes narrowed. "No communications. Hand over the radio." As Marcus carefully removed the police radio, a vehicle appeared around the canyon bend behind them. Black SUV, windows tinted, moving with purpose. The man glanced briefly toward it, attention dividing for just a fraction of a second. In that moment, Marcus pressed the transmit button on the radio, sending an open mic signal on the emergency channel, the predetermined distress indicator arranged with Sheriff Garza. The action appeared natural, simply holding the radio while removing it from his pocket. The SUV stopped 30 yards behind his truck. The rear door opened, and a figure emerged, tall, lean, carrying himself with the unmistakable authority of command. Unlike the others, he wore tactical gear without pretense of civilian disguise. The holstered sidearm and knife at his belt suggested confidence rather than threat. "Commander Vega, I presume," Marcus said quietly as the man approached. Vega's smile was thin, professional. "Mr. Reeves, your reputation precedes you." "As does yours," Marcus replied evenly. "Ex-Mexican Special Forces. Now applying those skills to different pursuits." Something flickered in Vega's eyes, surprise, perhaps respect, at the demonstration of intelligence gathering. "We are not so different, you and I. Both military men adapting to civilian opportunities. I deliver medicine to people who need it," Marcus stated, voice neutral. "That's the extent of my current ambition." Vega circled him slowly, assessing. "Yet you maintain combat readiness. Your vehicle shows signs of reinforcement. Your posture reveals constant tactical awareness." He stopped, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. "You prepare for war while claiming to seek peace." "Preparation isn't intention," Marcus replied. "Just habit." "Indeed." Vega nodded toward the medical containers. "These supplies will reach Cielo Vista after proper inspection and arrangement. Los Aguilas is establishing new security protocols for this region. All transportation must be verified, certified." "Controlled," Marcus corrected. Vega shrugged, unapologetic. "The government has abandoned these communities. We provide structure, protection, for reasonable accommodation." The euphemism for extortion hung between them, neither man pretending to misunderstand. "These medications are time and temperature sensitive," Marcus said, returning to practical concerns. People are waiting for them, and they will receive them, Vega assured him. Once our arrangement is formalized, you will come to our processing facility. The supplies will be verified, then delivered under our authority. The true message was clear. Los Aguilas would position themselves as the provider, the savior, establishing dependence and control. Classic insurgency strategy, become indispensable to the population you wish to dominate. Marcus appeared to consider the demand, gaze sweeping across the canyon in apparent contemplation. In reality, he was making final calculations, mapping positions, identifying vulnerabilities, formulating response options. I understand, he said finally, but I'll need to secure my vehicle first. Protocol for temperature-sensitive cargo. Vega nodded permission, eyes never leaving Marcus as he moved toward the truck. The cartel commander's posture remained relaxed, but Marcus recognized the coiled readiness beneath the casual stance, the hallmark of a predator confident in his capabilities. 2 minutes, Vega specified, checking his watch. Then we depart. Marcus opened the driver's door, leaning inside to adjust the climate control systems for the refrigerated medical containers. His movements were unhurried, methodical, giving every appearance of a conscientious delivery driver concerned about his cargo. In reality, his mind was mapping the tactical situation with ruthless precision. 5 visible hostiles. 2 on the ridgeline with overwatch capability. 3 at road level including Vega. Likely additional personnel in the SUV behind him. Estimated total force, 8 to 10 combatants. Unfavorable odds in direct confrontation. With deliberate care, he activated the secondary cooling system, ensuring the insulin would remain stable regardless of what happened next. Mission priority remained getting these supplies to Cielo Vista. All other considerations were secondary. As he worked, his left hand slipped beneath the driver's seat, finding the concealed compartment he'd installed years ago, not for criminal purposes, but from the habitual caution of a man who'd survived 3 combat deployments by leaving nothing to chance. Inside lay a compact device with a single red button protected by a safety cover. His fingers brushed across it, confirming position without activation. Insurance policy. Last resort. 1 minute, Mr. Reeves, Vega called, voice pleasant but firm. Marcus straightened, closing the climate control panel. Cargo secured, he announced, turning to face the cartel commander. Temperature stability confirmed for 6 hours. Vega's smile didn't reach his eyes. Excellent. Protecting valuable assets is always the priority, yes? Now, if you'll join me. He gestured toward the waiting SUV. Marcus took 3 measured steps away from his truck, then stopped. The diabetics in Cielo Vista need their insulin by nightfall, he stated, voice level. Some are children. A concern we share, Vega assured him, though his tone suggested otherwise. All legitimate cargo reaches its destination under Los Aguilas management. We are businessmen, not monsters. The statement hung in the air, its falsity apparent to both men. Marcus had seen the reports, the evidence of what happened to communities that resisted Los Aguilas management. Then as businessmen, perhaps we can negotiate, Marcus suggested, calculating for time. Each minute increased the probability that Sheriff Garza had received his distress signal and understood its meaning. Vega checked his watch again, impatience finally showing through his controlled demeanor. Negotiations occur at our facility. My superior awaits. Now, Mr. Reeves. The radio on Vega's belt crackled suddenly. Rapid Spanish, tone urgent. Marcus caught fragments. Warning, approaching vehicles, Southern Ridge. Vega's expression hardened as he responded sharply, eyes never leaving Marcus. One of the men at the roadblock jogged to Vega's side, speaking in hurried, low tones. Something about Border Patrol movement in the region, unexpected patrol patterns. Opportunity. Marcus assessed his position relative to the truck, the distance to cover, angles of fire from the ridgeline positions. The tactical situation remained disadvantageous, but the distraction created a narrow window of possibility. Vega finished his conversation and refocused on Marcus, expression now coldly professional. Change of plans. We accelerate our timeline. You come with us now. His hand moved to his sidearm, not drawing, but establishing clear threat. Your cargo will follow separately. Separation from the medical supplies was unacceptable. Mission parameters required ensuring delivery by whatever means necessary. Of course, Marcus agreed, voice calm as he raised his hands slightly in apparent compliance. Let me just retrieve my identification from the truck. Your business associates will want proper documentation. Without waiting for permission, he turned toward the vehicle, movements deliberately non-threatening. 3 steps. 2. 1. The moment his hand touched the truck door, he activated the contingency. His thumb pressed the remote device in his palm, the one he'd prepared during the night, wired to systems throughout his vehicle. Instantly, the truck horn blared at maximum volume, headlights and emergency flashers activated in strobing patterns, and the hidden smoke canisters he'd mounted beneath the chassis deployed thick white clouds. Not an attack, a distraction. In the momentary confusion, Marcus executed the maneuver he'd mentally rehearsed a dozen times since stopping. 2 fluid steps brought him to the driver's door. Single motion entry, key already in ignition. Engine roaring to life as the first shouts of alarm rose behind him. The truck lurched forward, accelerating directly toward the cartel vehicle partially blocking the road. Their positioning had been intended to prevent escape, but they'd calculated for a compliant civilian, not a ranger trained in counter-ambush tactics. Vega's voice cut through the chaos, barking commands with military precision. Gunfire erupted, rounds impacting the truck's reinforced rear panels. Marcus kept his body low behind the engine block, the vehicle's strongest protection, as he aimed for the narrow gap between the cartel SUV and the canyon wall. Inches to spare. Metal screamed against stone as the truck scraped along the rock face, the modified brush guard on the passenger side slamming into the SUV's rear quarter panel. The impact sent the blocking vehicle spinning, opening the passage just enough. Marcus accelerated through the gap, tires fighting for traction on the uneven road surface. In his mirrors, he saw Vega sprinting toward the damaged SUV, face transformed with cold fury. The cartel commander raised his sidearm, firing with controlled precision despite the chaos. The rear window exploded inward, safety glass cascading across the cargo area. Marcus kept his focus forward, maintaining acceleration while making himself as small a target as possible. 100 yards to the next bend. 75. 50. The truck rounded the curve, temporarily breaking line of sight with his pursuers. Immediately, Marcus executed the next phase of his hastily formulated escape plan. Instead of continuing along the main canyon road, the obvious route, he veered sharply onto a narrow maintenance track he'd identified during yesterday's reconnaissance. The rough trail climbed steeply up the canyon's eastern face, barely wide enough for his vehicle. Originally cut for mining operations decades ago, it was overgrown and easily missed unless you knew exactly where to look. His tires fought for purchase on the loose gravel as the truck clawed its way upward. Behind him, he heard engines roaring as the pursuit reorganized. They would expect him to flee along the main road, trying to outrun them toward Cielo Vista. The moments of confusion while they discovered his actual route were precious seconds gained. 2 minutes of punishing ascent brought him to the first plateau, a relatively flat area where the trail briefly leveled before continuing upward. Here, he executed another planned maneuver, backing the truck into a shallow cave-like overhang carved into the mountainside. Natural stone walls provided cover from 3 sides, while thick brush partially obscured the entrance. Engine off. Marcus moved instantly to the cargo area, checking the medical supplies. The containers remained secure despite the violent escape, temperature indicators still showing appropriate range for the insulin. Primary mission objective remained viable. Next, he retrieved his go bag from beneath the back seat, shrugging into the lightweight tactical vest concealed inside. Not military-grade protection, but better than nothing against what was coming. The M4 carbine came next, magazine inserted, round-chambered with practiced efficiency. The transformation from civilian to combatant took less than 30 seconds. Through the brush concealing his position, Marcus watched the canyon floor below. Two cartel vehicles now sped along the main road, continuing in the direction he'd initially been traveling. A third, the black SUV from the roadblock, now showing damage from the collision, moved more slowly, its occupants scanning the canyon walls with methodical precision. Vega. The commander hadn't fallen for the obvious diversion. He was hunting with professional discipline, searching for signs of deviation from the expected route. Marcus remained motionless in the shadows of his concealment as the SUV slowed near the base of the maintenance trail. Through his binoculars, he observed Vega exit the vehicle, studying the ground with focused intensity. The cartel commander knelt, examining the fresh tire tracks visible in the dusty soil, then looked up toward the eastern canyon wall directly toward Marcus's position. Their eyes didn't meet across the distance, but the hunter's instinct was unmistakable. Vega knew. The commander spoke into his radio, gesturing two men toward the maintenance trail, while the SUV continued along the main road. Standard flanking protocol, maintaining pressure from multiple directions. Marcus checked his watch. 20 minutes since the escape from the roadblock. Highway patrol or sheriff's deputies might be responding to his distress signal by now, but standard procedure would bring them to the main canyon entrance, miles from his current position. No immediate reinforcement could be expected. He was alone, outnumbered, with critical medical supplies that needed to reach Cielo Vista before nightfall. Direct confrontation remained inadvisable, but simple escape was equally impossible. The canyon's limited exit points were undoubtedly being monitored. A new strategy was required. The landscape itself offered the solution. The canyon system was a complex network of interconnected passages, many unmapped except by locals and those with specialized knowledge. During his 3 years delivering to remote communities, Marcus had studied these back routes extensively, identifying alternative pathways that most outsiders wouldn't know existed. One such route lay less than a mile east from his current position, an old mining trail that connected to a dry riverbed, eventually emerging near the northern edge of Cielo Vista. Difficult terrain, barely passable even with his modified truck, but a viable alternative to the monitored main roads. First, however, he needed to disengage from his current pursuers. The sound of engines growing closer spurred him into action. Two cartel members were ascending the maintenance trail, their vehicle grinding up the steep incline with determination. They would reach his position within minutes. Marcus quietly exited the truck, moving to a position with better vantage. Through his scope, he counted 3 armed men in the approaching vehicle, the 2 from the roadblock plus a third he hadn't seen before. Their weapons suggested serious intent. One carried an air platform rifle similar to his own, while the others had handguns and what appeared to be a shotgun. Killing them would be straightforward from his elevated position. Clean sight lines, unsuspecting targets, tactical advantage in every respect. But escalating to lethal force would irrevocably transform the situation. Once blood was spilled, there would be no return to normalcy for Cielo Vista. No possibility of resolution that didn't involve further violence. The cartel would respond with overwhelming force, endangering the entire community. Non-lethal alternatives existed. Marcus returned to his truck, retrieving a small pack from his emergency supplies. Working quickly, he assembled 3 devices he'd maintained for contingencies. Simple but effective tools combining commercial components with techniques learned during his military service. The approaching vehicle was now 200 yards below his position, laboring up the steep incline. Marcus moved laterally along the plateau, finding a suitable location where the trail narrowed between 2 large boulders. Here, he placed the first device, an improvised spike strip concealed beneath a light covering of loose soil. 50 yards beyond, Where the trail curved sharply around a rock outcropping, he positioned the second device, a smoke canister modified with a pressure trigger. Not harmful, but disorienting in the confined space. The third preparation was more complex. Returning to his truck, Marcus quickly ran a length of steel cable across the trail at bumper height, securing it to anchor points on either side. Not tight enough to create a deadly barrier, but sufficient to disable a vehicle hitting it at speed. Preparations complete, he returned to the truck, started the engine, and executed the next phase. Accelerating out of concealment, he drove ostentatiously across the visible portion of the plateau before disappearing onto the connecting trail that continued upward. The brief appearance was intentional, ensuring his pursuers spotted him, drawing them into pursuit through his prepared route. The grinding of engines below confirmed success. They had seen him and were accelerating upward, abandoning caution in favor of closing distance. Marcus navigated the upper trail with practiced skill, finding the turnoff that would eventually connect to his planned escape route. Before committing to that path, however, he stopped at a vantage point overlooking his preparations, watching as events unfolded according to design. The cartel vehicle hit the concealed spike strip at approximately 20 miles per hour. The effect was immediate, front tires shredding, the SUV nosediving as the driver fought for control on the narrow trail. It slid sideways, coming to rest against the canyon wall, temporarily disabled but not catastrophically damaged. The occupants reacted with professional discipline, exiting the vehicle in tactical formation despite the setback. Their movements confirmed Marcus's earlier assessment. These weren't common criminals, but trained operatives with combat experience. As they advanced cautiously up the trail, the second device activated. Thick white smoke billowed suddenly across the pathway, momentarily obscuring vision and disrupting their coordinated approach. Confusion was brief. They were too well trained for prolonged disorientation, but the delay served its purpose. Marcus continued driving, leaving his pursuers to discover the final obstacle on their own. The mission clock was ticking. Medical supplies needed to reach their destination. The next phase of the canyon journey tested both driver and vehicle. The trail narrowed further, in some places barely wider than the truck itself, with sheer drops to one side and rock walls to the other. Progress was painstaking, each mile requiring intense concentration and frequent stops to assess the path ahead. 2 hours into this punishing traverse, Marcus paused at a natural overlook to check his bearings and verify the cargo integrity. The insulin remained within temperature parameters, though the window was narrowing. He needed to reach Cielo Vista within the next 3 hours to maintain viability. Through his binoculars, he surveyed the canyon network spreading below. No immediate signs of pursuit on his current route, but significant cartel activity along the main roads. At least 6 vehicles now patrolled the primary canyon passage, and 2 more were visible at the southern exit point. Roadblocks had been established at both main entrances. Cielo Vista was effectively cut off. As he studied the tactical situation, his satellite phone vibrated. Sheriff Garza's number. Marcus. The sheriff's voice was tight with concern. Border Patrol received your distress signal. We have units responding to the canyon entrance, but cartel presence has escalated significantly. Where are you? Alternative route, Marcus replied, keeping details intentionally vague in case of communication interception. Eastern Passage. Medical supplies intact. Estimated arrival 3 hours. Understood. Garza processed this information quickly. Be advised, Los Aguilas has established checkpoints on all main access roads. They're claiming security authority, checking all vehicles. Border Patrol is monitoring but hasn't intervened due to jurisdictional complications. Typical bureaucratic hesitation. By the time proper authorizations worked through official channels, the cartel would have firmly established territorial control. Additional information, Garza continued. Doc Jensen reports 2 diabetic patients in critical need of insulin. 11-year-old girl and elderly man. Current supplies will be exhausted by nightfall. The stakes clarified further. Children's lives now hung explicitly in the balance. "I'll get through," Marcus stated, simple certainty rather than bravado. "I know." The sheriff's voice reflected both confidence and concern. "But Marcus, they've called in reinforcements. Our sources report at least 20 additional cartel operatives entering the area in the past hour. This is becoming a major operation." The escalation made tactical sense. Marcus had disrupted their carefully orchestrated territorial expansion, damaging both equipment and credibility. Vega would need to reassert control quickly and decisively. "They're not just after the supplies anymore," Garza added gravely. "They're hunting you specifically. Vega has apparently taken your escape as a personal affront." Also predictable. Special Forces operators like Vega built their reputation on control and dominance. Being outmaneuvered created face-threatening vulnerability that required response. "Understood," Marcus acknowledged. "We'll maintain current approach protocol. Recommend town security enhancement." Already implemented. Deputies are coordinating volunteer security teams. Garza hesitated. "These people aren't soldiers, Marcus." "They don't need to be," Marcus reassured him. "Defensive posture only. Delay and observe. Official response will come eventually." After ending the call, Marcus returned to his vehicle with renewed urgency. The tactical situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. What had begun as a simple roadblock operation was rapidly evolving into a full territorial seizure, with his actions serving as catalyst and justification. The next hour of travel pushed both machine and man to their limits. The road became increasingly theoretical, more suggestion than actual path, as Marcus navigated dry creek beds and game trails, compensating for mechanical disadvantage with intimate knowledge of the terrain. In his mind, he was simultaneously present in two places: the sun-drenched canyon of the American Southwest and the dust-choked mountain passes of Afghanistan's Khyber province. The parallels were striking enough to trigger vivid flashback, not the disorienting kind that plagued many veterans, but tactical memory surging to the surface with visceral clarity. August 2013. Specialist Rodriguez beside him in the lead Humvee, transmission grinding as they climbed toward a remote observation post along routes very similar to this one. Intelligence had reported increased insurgent activity in the region, but their mission was routine resupply, medical necessities for the isolated outpost. The ambush had come without warning. IED first, disabling the trailing vehicle. Then coordinated small arms fire from elevated positions on both sides of the narrow valley. Textbook tactics, professionally executed. What the insurgents hadn't known was that their routine resupply target was actually a Ranger Quick Reaction Force disguised as a logistics convoy. The response had been immediate and overwhelming, precisely the scenario Marcus was now working to avoid repeating. The memory sharpened his focus rather than distracting from it. Then, as now, the mission parameters remained clear despite tactical complications. Critical supplies must reach their destination. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had successfully traversed the most challenging terrain, emerging onto a wider trail that showed occasional use by local ranchers. According to his mental map, this path would eventually connect with an unmaintained county road approaching Cielo Vista from the northeast, a direction the cartel might not have prioritized in their perimeter establishment. The truck rounded a bend, and Marcus immediately braked, reversing quickly into cover behind a large boulder. 200 yards ahead, a cartel vehicle was parked across the trail, another checkpoint, this one covering what they'd correctly identified as a potential back route. Through his binoculars, Marcus counted 4 armed men, deployed in tactically sound positions with clear fields of fire. Unlike the earlier roadblock, this one wasn't attempting to appear as a security checkpoint. Their weapons were prominently displayed, defensive positions already established. They expected trouble. Direct confrontation remained inadvisable, But the alternative routes would add hours to his journey, time the insulin-dependent patients in Cielo Vista didn't have. A new approach was required. Marcus studied the surrounding terrain, identifying a narrow ridgeline that paralleled the trail approximately 50 yards to the west. If he could move the truck off-road, traversing that ridge, he might bypass the checkpoint entirely. The maneuver would be challenging even for his modified vehicle: steep approach, uneven terrain, significant drop-off on the far side. Success would require perfect execution with minimal margin for error. Carefully backing the truck to a concealed position, Marcus exited to conduct closer reconnaissance of his planned route. Moving silently through the brush, he approached the ridgeline, assessing slope angles and surface composition. Difficult but possible, assuming the truck's suspension and traction systems performed to their limits. As he completed his assessment, a sudden movement caught his peripheral vision. Dropping instantly to a prone position, he remained motionless as a two-man patrol passed less than 20 yards away. Cartel security sweeping the perimeter around their checkpoint. Their conversation, carried on the slight breeze, confirmed his earlier intelligence. Reinforcements had indeed arrived, with standing orders to locate both him and the medical supplies. Vega was personally coordinating the operation from a command post established near the canyon's southern entrance. The patrol passed without detecting his presence, their search pattern suggesting standard security procedure rather than specific tracking. Once they disappeared around a rock formation, Marcus returned quickly to his vehicle. The off-road bypass would need to be executed immediately before the patrol completed their circuit and returned to this sector. Starting the engine, he navigated carefully to his identified approach point, engaging the four-wheel drive system and locking the differentials for maximum traction. The truck began its ascent up the steep slope, tires fighting for purchase on the loose surface. Halfway up, the rear wheels lost traction, beginning a dangerous sideways slide toward a drop-off. Marcus corrected instinctively, feathering the throttle while turning slightly into the slide. The truck shuddered, then regained forward momentum, continuing its climb toward the ridgeline. Cresting the ridge required careful weight distribution management to prevent rollover. Marcus shifted supplies within the cargo area, creating counterbalance as the truck tilted precariously during the final approach. The chassis scraped against stone as the vehicle finally achieved the ridgeline, now sitting in extremely exposed position visible for miles in all directions. No time to worry about visibility. Marcus accelerated gently, navigating along the narrow spine of rock with mere inches of clearance on either side. To his left, a 60-foot drop to the canyon floor. To his right, a steeper but shorter fall into a ravine. The path allowed no errors in judgment or execution. 300 yards of harrowing progress brought him to the descent point, a natural decline where the ridge gradually sloped back toward the trail beyond the Cartel checkpoint. This approach remained visible from the checkpoint, but the distance, nearly half a mile, made accurate weapons engagement unlikely, especially from prepared positions oriented toward the trail rather than the ridge. The descent began smoothly, the truck's weight now working with gravity rather than against it. Marcus modulated speed using engine braking rather than wheels, minimizing dust generation that might draw attention. Halfway down, disaster nearly struck. The ground beneath the right front tire suddenly gave way, a hidden erosion pocket collapsing under the vehicle's weight. The truck lurched dramatically, teetering on the edge of rollover as the wheel dropped into empty space. Marcus reacted with the calm precision of combat experience. No sudden movements. No overcorrection. Gentle throttle application to the remaining wheels with ground contact. Incremental steering adjustment to redistribute weight. For 3 eternal seconds, the outcome remained uncertain. The truck balanced between recovery and catastrophe. Then, gradually, the vehicle stabilized, continuing its descent with the damaged suspension groaning in protest. By the time the truck reached level ground beyond the checkpoint, Marcus's shirt was soaked with sweat despite the vehicle's air conditioning. The medical supplies, he confirmed immediately, remained secure and within temperature parameters. Mission still viable. A quick mechanical assessment revealed significant but non-critical damage. Bent tie rod, compromised shock absorber, potential axle alignment issues. The truck remained operational, though top speed and handling would be affected. Sufficient for the final approach to Cielo Vista. The remainder of the journey followed ranch roads and dry creek beds, avoiding main routes where cartel presence would be concentrated. By late afternoon, Marcus could see Cielo Vista in the distance, its scattered buildings nestled in the valley below. Between his position and the town, however, one final obstacle remained. The only viable approach from this direction crossed an exposed stretch of flatland, nearly a mile of open terrain with minimal cover. Satellite imagery had confirmed cartel observation posts established on elevations overlooking this area. Simply driving across would invite intervention, potentially endangering the nearly completed mission. As Marcus considered options, his satellite phone vibrated. Sheriff Garza again. Marcus, what's your position? Doc Jensen reports critical situation developing with the diabetic patients. Northeast approach, final phase, Marcus replied. Visual on the town, but exposed crossing remaining. Cartel observation confirmed on surrounding elevations. Garza was silent for a moment, calculating. We might have a diversion option. Volunteer fire department has scheduled training exercise. Smoke generation on the western perimeter could draw attention, give you crossing opportunity. Timeline: 10 minutes. Single crossing window, limited duration. Understood. Proceeding to position Alpha. Marcus ended the call, already moving the truck toward his designated approach point. 8 minutes later, thick smoke began rising from Cielo Vista's western edge, the training exercise beginning on schedule. Almost immediately, activity visible at the observation posts shifted, attention drawn to the unexpected development at the town perimeter. Marcus seized the opportunity, accelerating across the open ground with single-minded determination. The truck's damaged suspension protested every irregularity in the terrain, but the distraction proved effective. No intervention materialized as he covered the exposed distance and reached the northeastern outskirts of town. Rather than proceeding directly to the clinic, Marcus navigated through back alleys and service roads, maintaining cover from potential observation. The cartel's focus might currently be divided, but operational security remained paramount until mission completion. Doc Jensen was waiting at the clinic's rear entrance, expression tight with concern. His eyes widened at the truck's condition, bullet holes visible in the rear panels, suspension clearly damaged, dust and brush covering every surface. My God, Marcus, he breathed as he helped unload the refrigerated containers. When the sheriff said there was trouble, insulin parameters maintained, Marcus interrupted, focusing on mission essentials. Temperature integrity confirmed. How are the patients? Jensen's professional demeanor reasserted itself. Critical, but stable. This delivery will sustain them. He paused, studying Marcus more carefully. You're injured. Marcus glanced down, noticing for the first time the blood seeping through his shirt sleeve, likely from glass fragments when the rear window shattered during the escape. Combat focus had suppressed pain recognition. Minor, he dismissed. Supplies distribution is priority. The doctor's expression suggested disagreement with this assessment, but he recognized the futility of argument. Together, they transferred the critical medications into the clinic's refrigeration systems, ensuring the life-saving supplies were secure. Only then did Marcus allow himself to acknowledge the successful completion of the primary mission. The truck was damaged, his location compromised, the situation with Los Aguilas far from resolved, but the essential medical supplies had reached their destination. Lives would be preserved. They've established a full perimeter, Sheriff Garza explained, spreading a county map across his desk. Red markers indicated confirmed cartel positions surrounding Cielo Vista. Checkpoints on all main roads. Observation posts on high ground. Mobile patrols in between. Textbook containment operation. Marcus studied the tactical picture with professional detachment. 2 hours had passed since his arrival at the clinic. Enough time for Doc Jensen to treat his minor wounds and for him to secure what remained of his damaged vehicle. Now, in the sheriff's office with blinds drawn against potential observation, the full scope of their situation was becoming clear. Not containment, Marcus corrected. Isolation. They're cutting off the town before establishing internal control. Garza nodded grimly. Border Patrol has increased presence along the main highway, but they're claiming insufficient evidence for direct intervention. Cartel vehicles all have legitimate registration. Checkpoints are officially private security operations. Plausible deniability, Marcus noted. Standard insurgency tactics. Established de facto control while maintaining legal fiction. Meanwhile, we're effectively cut off, Garza continued. Supply deliveries blocked. Communications intermittent. They've got someone jamming cell signals periodically. Landlines still operational, but who knows for how long. Marcus traced the canyon system on the map, mind calculating options, contingencies, response scenarios. How many deputies available? 3, plus myself. The sheriff's expression reflected professional frustration. County budget cuts last year reduced staffing. We've got 24 civilian volunteers with varying degrees of usefulness, mostly hunters and ranch hands. Not exactly a qualified security force. Numbers aren't everything, Marcus observed. Terrain knowledge and defensive positioning can compensate significantly. Lightning flashed outside the window, followed seconds later by distant thunder. The forecasted storm was moving in from the west, dark clouds gathering over the canyon rims. Weather would be a factor in whatever came next. Garza studied him with considered assessment. You've done this before. Not just fought, organized a defense. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging rather than elaborating. Afghanistan. Remote outposts with limited personnel facing superior hostile forces. Tactical scenarios distressingly similar to their current situation. What's your assessment? The sheriff asked directly. They want control without direct confrontation if possible, Marcus analyzed. Vega's approach suggests military precision rather than typical cartel brutality. He'll isolate, demoralize, then offer protection in exchange for compliance. And if that doesn't work? Escalating pressure, Marcus continued. Selective targeting of community leaders. Demonstrations of force. Creating internal division by offering preferential treatment to collaborators. The sheriff absorbed this grim prognosis silently. And your recommendation? Before Marcus could answer, rapid footsteps approached the office door. Deputy Ramirez entered without knocking, expression tense. Sheriff, they've sent a delegation. 3 vehicles at the eastern checkpoint requesting entry to town. Say they want to discuss security arrangements with community leadership. Garza exchanged glances with Marcus. Vega, Ramirez nodded. In person. Says he comes in peace. Wants a public meeting at the community center. Classic psychological operation, Marcus noted quietly. Public demonstration of authority. Separating leadership from general population for intimidation. The sheriff considered their limited options. Direct confrontation with superior cartel forces would endanger civilians. Refusing dialogue might escalate the situation immediately. Tell them I'll meet with 3 representatives only, Garza decided. Community center in 1 hour. They come unarmed, or no meeting. After Ramirez departed, the sheriff turned back to Marcus. I need you there, but not visibly. Your escape has made you a primary target. Vega will be looking to make an example. Marcus nodded in agreement. I'll establish overwatch from the second-floor office. Sight lines to the main hall, minimal exposure. This is diplomatic, not combat, Garza emphasized. I need intelligence on their real intentions, assessment of force capabilities. Understood. As the sheriff prepared for the confrontation, Marcus slipped out the back entrance, moving through side streets with practiced invisibility. The approaching storm had darkened the afternoon sky, occasional lightning illuminating the mountains surrounding the valley. Thunder rolled continuously now, nature's artillery presaging the conflict to come. The Cielo Vista Community Center occupied what had once been the town's elementary school before declining population forced educational consolidation. Its cinder-block construction and elevated position offered both tactical advantages and vulnerabilities. Marcus conducted a swift perimeter assessment before entering through a maintenance access, avoiding the main doors where deputies were already establishing security. The second-floor office provided perfect overwatch of the main meeting hall below, its windows partially concealed by dusty blinds. Marcus positioned himself with optimal sightlines while minimizing his own visibility. The M4 carbine rested beside him, not an immediate option given the diplomatic nature of the meeting, but available if the situation deteriorated catastrophically. Within the hour, cartel vehicles arrived at the community center. Marcus observed their approach through compact binoculars, cataloging personnel, weapons, and tactical positioning. Vega emerged from the lead SUV, accompanied by two men whose bearings suggested military background. All three wore business casual attire rather than tactical gear, a calculated choice to present legitimate appearance. Additional cartel personnel remained with the vehicles, establishing a defensive perimeter while maintaining the fiction of professional security rather than armed occupation. Marcus counted 14 operatives total, all displaying the disciplined alertness of trained combatants rather than common criminals. Below in the meeting hall, Sheriff Garza had arranged a simple conference table with chairs on either side. Doc Jensen, Mayor Hernandez, and Ellie Sandoval, representing medical services, government, and commerce respectively, sat on one side, presenting a unified community leadership presence. Vega entered with measured confidence, his associates following at precisely calculated distances, close enough for immediate support, far enough to demonstrate respect for the proceedings. The cartel commander's eyes scanned the room with professional assessment, lingering briefly on the upper level where Marcus remained concealed. Sheriff Garza opened the discussion. "You requested this meeting, Mr. Vega? We're listening." Vega smiled with practiced diplomacy. "First, allow me to express regret for any inconvenience our security operations have caused. Los Aguilas is implementing a regional safety initiative in response to increasing criminal activities affecting communities like yours." Safety initiative. Mayor Hernandez repeated the euphemism with thinly veiled skepticism. "Is that what you call armed checkpoints blocking legitimate commerce?" "Controlled access," Vega corrected smoothly. "Ensuring only verified personnel and supplies enter your community. Recent incidents have demonstrated the vulnerability of your current security arrangements." The reference to Marcus's confrontation hung unspoken in the air. "We have elected law enforcement," Ellie interjected, nodding toward Sheriff Garza. "County, state, and federal authorities with jurisdiction. Your organization has no legal standing here." Vega's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Legal frameworks often fail to address practical realities, Ms. Sandoval. Your community is isolated. Response times from official agencies measured in hours, not minutes. Meanwhile, criminal elements, competing cartels with less professional standards than ours, are expanding throughout the region." From his concealed position, Marcus recognized the strategy, creating fear of alternatives while positioning Los Aguilas as the lesser evil. Standard insurgency doctrine. Make legitimate authority appear ineffective, then fill the resulting power vacuum. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sheriff Garza asked directly. Vega leaned forward. "A security partnership. Los Aguilas provides protection, ensures safe transportation corridors, guarantees essential supplies. In exchange, the community acknowledges our authority regarding access control and pays a reasonable management fee." "Protection money," Doc Jensen stated flatly. "Investment in security," Vega countered without hesitation. 20% of business revenues. Reasonable considering the comprehensive services provided. Mayor Hernandez laughed incredulously. 20% would bankrupt half the businesses in town within months. Perhaps initially challenging, Vega acknowledged. But consider the alternative: no commerce at all due to completely severed supply lines. No medical deliveries. No fuel. Complete isolation. The threat was explicit now. Comply or be cut off entirely. Sheriff Garza's expression remained professionally neutral. And if we decline your generous offer? Vega's smile never wavered. Then market forces would unfortunately take effect. Supply and demand. When essentials become scarce, prices rise dramatically. People become desperate. Social order deteriorates. He spread his hands in a gesture of regret. We've seen this pattern in other communities that initially declined partnership. Lightning flashed through the windows, briefly illuminating the tension-filled room with stark white light. Thunder followed immediately, directly overhead now. The storm had arrived. We'll need time to consult with the broader community, Mayor Hernandez stated, attempting to buy time. Of course, Vega agreed magnanimously. Democracy is important. 24 hours should be sufficient, yes? We'll return tomorrow for your answer. As the cartel delegation prepared to depart, Vega paused, turning back to the community leaders. One additional matter. The individual who disrupted our security checkpoint earlier today, Marcus Reeves. Former military. We understand he's a resident of your community. Sheriff Garza's expression revealed nothing. Mr. Reeves makes deliveries to the region occasionally. Not a permanent resident. Nevertheless, Vega continued smoothly. He interfered with legitimate security operations, damaged valuable equipment, and endangered personnel. As a gesture of good faith in our developing partnership, we expect his surrender to our authority. Mr. Reeves isn't here, the sheriff stated truthfully. And even if he were, I have no jurisdiction to surrender American citizens to private organizations. Vega's smile tightened fractionally. A technical perspective. Perhaps reconsideration will come with further reflection on your community's priorities. He nodded respectfully to each leader. Until tomorrow. From his observation point, Marcus tracked the delegation's departure, noting increased security protocols compared to their arrival. Vega's team moved with heightened alertness, suggesting they anticipated potential opposition despite the diplomatic veneer. Once the cartel vehicles cleared the perimeter, Marcus descended to join the community leaders. The mood in the meeting room was somber as the implications of Vega's ultimatum settled over them. 20% is impossible, Ellie stated flatly. Most businesses here operate on 5% margins or less. This isn't extortion. It's a deliberate path to taking over properties when owners can't pay. Standard cartel expansion strategy, Marcus confirmed as he entered. Economic strangulation followed by asset seizure. They're not looking for partners. They want ownership. Mayor Hernandez shook her head in frustration. We need state or federal intervention. This is literally why we pay taxes, which requires evidence of criminal activity, Sheriff Garza pointed out. Vega's been careful. His people have legitimate identification, registered vehicles. They're positioning as private security contractors, not cartel enforcers. Rain lashed against the windows now, the storm reaching full intensity. The lights flickered momentarily. Power infrastructure in Cielo Vista was notoriously vulnerable during severe weather. They want me as a demonstration, Marcus observed dispassionately. Public surrender establishes dominance, demoralizes resistance. Absolutely not, Doc Jensen stated firmly. You risked your life bringing critical supplies through their blockade. Handing you over isn't even a consideration. The sheriff nodded agreement before turning to Marcus. What's your assessment? Militarily speaking, Marcus considered the tactical situation methodically. They have superior numbers, approximately 30 combat-effective personnel based on observed deployment patterns. Professional training, military-grade weapons, disciplined command structure. Significant advantages. And our position? Mayor Hernandez asked. Defensible with preparation, Marcus analyzed. Limited access points to the town center. Terrain knowledge advantage. Civilian population provides both vulnerability and strength depending on organization. Lightning struck nearby. A deafening crack followed instantly by thunder that shook the building. The lights failed completely, plunging the room into stormy twilight before emergency generators engaged, providing minimal illumination. In that moment of darkness, Marcus's mind crystallized around a realization that had been forming since his confrontation in the canyon. This situation paralleled his military experiences too precisely to be coincidence. The tactical problem was fundamentally identical. A small force with limited resources facing a superior enemy with territorial advantage. The Ranger's solution came to him with perfect clarity. "We don't fight them directly," he stated as the emergency light stabilized. "We shape the battlefield to negate their advantages." The others turned to him with renewed attention. "The valley," Marcus continued, moving to the large topographical map mounted on the wall. "They've established containment through controlled access points, but their force is necessarily dispersed to maintain the perimeter." His finger traced the canyon system surrounding Cielo Vista. Their checkpoints are positioned at choke points along main roads. Observation posts on high ground. Mobile patrols connecting these fixed positions. Textbook perimeter security. "Which we can't break through," Sheriff Garza noted. "We don't break through," Marcus corrected. "We draw them in." Understanding began dawning in the sheriff's eyes. "You're suggesting?" "Controlled collapse of the perimeter," Marcus confirmed. "Create the perception of vulnerability at a specific point. When they concentrate forces to exploit the apparent weakness, we spring the trap," the sheriff finished. Marcus nodded. The canyon system offers perfect terrain for asymmetric engagement. Multiple interconnected channels, elevated positions, limited visibility. Knowing the terrain intimately provides substantial tactical advantage against numerically superior forces. Mayor Hernandez looked skeptical. "You're talking about fighting a cartel paramilitary force with a handful of deputies and civilian volunteers." "Not fighting directly," Marcus clarified. "Strategic disruption. Target their command and control structure, communications, transportation assets. Create sufficient disorder to demonstrate that controlling this territory will be prohibitively expensive. And give state or federal authorities time to intervene," Sheriff Garza added, following the logic. The storm's intensity peaked outside, rain hammering against the windows with percussive force. Nature's violence provided appropriate backdrop to their discussion of engineered chaos. "This won't be without risk," Marcus cautioned. "Once engaged, Vega will recognize the strategy. He has military training, combat experience. He'll adapt quickly." "What's the alternative?" Ellie asked practically. "Surrender to extortion? Watch our communities slowly strangled." The question hung in the air as each person considered the implications. There would be no clean solution, no perfect scenario ensuring safety. Only difficult choices between unpalatable options. "We need to evacuate vulnerable civilians," Doc Jensen suggested. "Children, elderly, medical cases." "Evacuation would signal intention," Marcus noted. "Lose strategic surprise." "Some risks are necessary," the doctor countered firmly. "I won't gamble with patients' lives." Sheriff Garza made the decision. "Doc's right. Priority evacuation of most vulnerable through our remaining secure routes. Disguised as routine medical transport. Remaining population consolidated in defensible locations. I'll coordinate civilian volunteers," Ellie offered. "Many have hunting and outdoors experience. Not soldiers, but familiar with terrain and basic fieldcraft." Mayor Hernandez still appeared uncertain. "This is assuming they'll fall for this vulnerability you're planning to create. These aren't amateurs." "No," Marcus agreed. "They're professionals following professional doctrine, which makes certain responses predictable. The key is creating a scenario compelling enough to override cautious analysis." The meeting transitioned to operational planning, with Marcus outlining the tactical approach while Sheriff Garza identified personnel resources. Doc Jensen departed to prepare medical evacuation protocols, and Ellie left to organize civilian volunteers. 2 hours later, as darkness fell over the storm-lashed valley, the core plan had taken shape. Marcus stood alone at the community center windows, watching lightning illuminate the canyon walls in stark relief. The terrain that had nearly claimed his life earlier that day would soon become the battlefield for Cielo Vista's freedom. His satellite phone vibrated. Mike Danvers again. Marcus, we've got movement. Significant Los Aguilas reinforcements entering the canyon system. At least 3 tactical teams with heavy weapons. They're not maintaining the pretense of private security anymore. Timeline? Marcus asked, mind already adjusting plans based on this development. They crossed the county line 20 minutes ago. ETA to your position approximately 1 hour, weather depending. Vega was accelerating the timeline, abandoning diplomacy for direct action. The supposed 24-hour consideration period had been tactical deception. Any federal response potential? Marcus inquired, though he already anticipated the answer. Bureaucratic logjam, Mike confirmed. Border Patrol requesting FBI jurisdiction, FBI claiming insufficient evidence for intervention, both waiting on Justice Department guidance. Reality is there at least 6 hours for meaningful response even if authorization came through now. Cielo Vista would face the initial confrontation alone. After ending the call, Marcus rejoined Sheriff Garza in the operations center they'd established in the community center basement. The cramped room now contained communications equipment, maps, and the handful of deputies and civilian volunteers with relevant experience. Timeline compressed, Marcus reported succinctly. Cartel reinforcements inbound. Approximately 1 hour. Garza absorbed this information with professional calm. So much for diplomatic considerations. Evacuation status? First medical transport departed 20 minutes ago, Deputy Ramirez reported. Doc Jensen accompanying critical patients. Second vehicle preparing now. Accelerate all preparations, the sheriff ordered. Defensive positions established within 30 minutes. Communication protocols active immediately. As the small force mobilized according to their hastily formulated plan, Marcus conducted final equipment checks. His personal gear remained limited. The M4 carbine, sidearm, basic tactical vest, and specialized equipment salvaged from his truck. Not optimal for what was coming, but sufficient given the combat parameters. The storm continued unabated, transforming the dry canyon system into a network of flash floods and mud flows. Challenging conditions, but equally problematic for cartel forces unfamiliar with local flood patterns. Weather was now a tactical factor benefiting defenders with superior terrain knowledge. Sheriff Garza approached as Marcus finished preparations. Your recommendation about civilian participants? Non-combatant roles only, Marcus advised. Observation, communication, logistics support. Keep them away from direct engagement zones. The sheriff nodded agreement. Most have been assigned to evacuation support and defensive perimeter monitoring. Those with military backgrounds are positioned as secondary response team under Deputy Wilson's command. Outside, engines growled as vehicles moved into predetermined positions throughout the town. Not a military operation by any professional standard, but an organized community response with clearly defined objectives and chains of command. Time to move to your position, Garza noted, checking his watch. Predicted contact in 45 minutes based on current intelligence. Marcus nodded, gathering his equipment. The initial phase of their strategic response required him to operate independently, establishing conditions for the subsequent defensive engagement. Remember, he emphasized to the sheriff, the objective isn't to defeat them directly. Create sufficient disruption to delay meaningful control until official intervention becomes viable. Understood, Garza confirmed. Phase 1, your independent operation to disrupt command and control. Phase 2, defensive engagement to channelize their response. Phase 3, fall back to secondary positions if required. Simple but effective strategic framework, adapted from countless military operations across history. Marcus recognized the pattern from his Ranger deployments: asymmetric response against superior force, utilizing terrain and local knowledge to compensate for numerical disadvantage. 20 minutes later, Marcus was moving through the storm-drenched canyon, navigating with the practiced ease of someone intimately familiar with the terrain. His route followed game trails and dry washes, avoiding established paths where cartel observers might be positioned. Rain hammered down with relentless intensity, reducing visibility to mere yards while transforming the normally dusty landscape into treacherous mud flows. Lightning provided sporadic illumination, each flash freezing the tortured landscape in stark white relief before plunging it back into darkness. Through his night vision monocular, Marcus identified the first cartel position, a two-man observation post overlooking the eastern approach to Cielo Vista. The men had established reasonable cover beneath a rocky overhang, maintaining visibility of the main road while protected from the worst of the storm. Marcus bypassed their position without engagement. Individual observation posts weren't priority targets in this phase. His objective lay deeper in the canyon system. 15 minutes of careful movement brought him to his primary target, the cartel's forward command post established at the junction where the main canyon road split toward multiple access points to the valley. Through driving rain, he observed 4 vehicles positioned in defensive formation around a central command SUV. Portable generators powered communications equipment protected under hastily erected canopies. Armed personnel maintained perimeter security despite the challenging weather conditions. Professional operation, military precision. The heart of Vega's tactical control structure. Marcus settled into a concealed observation position, conducting detailed assessment before committing to action. 12 personnel visible, likely more inside vehicles. Communications array featuring satellite uplink and tactical radios. Generator providing power for essential systems. Vulnerabilities identified: single power source, exposed communications equipment, vehicles positioned for convenience rather than maximum security. Tactical opportunity emerging. The storm intensified further when now driving the rain horizontally across the canyon floor. Lightning struck a nearby ridge, momentarily blinding even through night vision. The resulting thunder was immediate and physical, vibrating through the sodden ground. Perfect conditions for what came next. Marcus extracted 3 devices from his equipment pack. Compact units containing specialized components salvaged from his emergency caches. Not explosive ordnance, but technological disruptors designed to create maximum system chaos with minimal physical damage. Ranger training had emphasized the disproportionate impact of targeting command and control infrastructure rather than personnel. Moving with practiced stealth despite the challenging conditions, he approached the perimeter of the command post from the blind side created by driving rain. The cartel security personnel maintained professional discipline but suffered the universal challenge of reduced vigilance during extended weather exposure. Human nature created exploitable gaps in even the most professional security operation. The first device was positioned near the primary generator, concealed among equipment cases. Simple timer activation, no remote detonator that might be detected by countermeasures. The second unit found placement beneath the communications vehicle, magnetic attachment, securing it to the chassis. The third went above the satellite uplink array, rain cover providing perfect concealment. Extraction followed the same route as infiltration, Marcus moving with the measured precision of extensive combat experience. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risk, mission parameters maintaining absolute priority over personal safety or combat impulse. Clear of the immediate security perimeter, he established observation position on elevated ground overlooking the command post. Final verification of device placement. Sight lines confirmed for what would follow. The satellite phone vibrated against his hip. Sheriff Garza. Reinforcement convoy passed checkpoint Bravo, the sheriff reported, voice barely audible over the storm's fury. 6 vehicles, heavy weapon systems observed. ETA your position approximately 7 minutes. Acknowledged, Marcus responded. Phase 1 initiating. Maintain defensive preparation. The call ended. Marcus checked his watch, calculating precise timing. The approaching convoy would arrive just as the command post disruption began, maximizing confusion during the critical reinforcement integration. Lightning split the sky directly overhead, thunder immediate and deafening. In that moment of natural violence, Marcus activated the remote trigger for the sequence devices. The effect was precisely as designed. The first device activated with a sharp electrical crack, instantly overloading the generator's control systems and plunging the command post into darkness. Backup systems engaged automatically, but encountered the second device's interference pattern, creating power fluctuations rather than stable supply. Communications equipment suffered cascading failure as conflicting power surges damaged sensitive components. The satellite uplink collapsed entirely, severed from both power and functional transmission capability by the third device's specialized disruption field. Through his night vision, Marcus observed the professional but increasingly urgent response as Cartel personnel attempted to restore critical systems. Flashlights created moving patterns across the command area. Voices called out with increasing tension despite maintained discipline. Command and control infrastructure, the nervous system of any military-style operation, was effectively severed. The approaching convoy arrived at the disabled command post minutes later, headlights illuminating the chaos through sheets of driving rain. Vega himself emerged from the lead vehicle, his posture reflecting controlled fury rather than panic as he assessed the situation. Even at this distance, Marcus recognized the cartel commander's immediate grasp of what had occurred. Not random system failure, but calculated attack targeting specific vulnerabilities. Vega's head lifted, scanning the surrounding ridgelines with predatory intensity despite the near-impossible visibility conditions. For a moment, it seemed the cartel commander looked directly at Marcus's position, instinct overcoming tactical limitations. Then Vega turned sharply, barking orders that reorganized the disrupted command structure with impressive efficiency. Phase 1 complete. The cartel's communications and coordination capabilities were temporarily but significantly degraded. Decision cycles would be extended, information flow disrupted, command authority fragmented. Perfect conditions for Phase 2. Marcus began his extraction, moving laterally along the ridge before descending toward his next position. The tactical situation would evolve rapidly now, with Vega forced to either delay his planned operation against Cielo Vista or proceed with compromised command capabilities. Based on the cartel commander's observed response and psychological profile, Marcus calculated high probability of the latter. Military professionals like Vega often prioritized momentum over perfect conditions, recognizing that initiative retained often outweighed temporary disadvantages. 20M. Inudez of challenging movement through the storm-ravaged terrain brought Marcus to his secondary position, a concealed overlook providing observation of the narrowest point along the canyon approach to Cielo Vista. Here, Sheriff Garza had established the defensive focal point of their strategy. Not a conventional defensive line. They lacked personnel for such approach, but a channelization point designed to guide cartel response into prepared engagement areas. Deputies and civilian volunteers with military experience had established overlapping fields of fire covering the restricted passage, while non-combatant supporters maintained observation posts with communication links to the command center. Marcus confirmed proper positioning through his night vision monocular before reporting via satellite phone. Phase 1 complete. Command infrastructure disrupted. Vega reorganizing with reduced capabilities. Anticipate continued advance rather than tactical pause. Understood, Sheriff Garza acknowledged. Phase 2 preparations complete. Evacuation of priority civilians 70% complete. The storm's intensity began diminishing, the torrential downpour gradually reducing to steady rain. Lightning continued, but with decreasing frequency, moving eastward across the valley. Tactical conditions were shifting again, visibility improving incrementally with each passing minute. Through his optics, Marcus detected movement at the far end of the canyon approach. Vehicle lights appearing through the diminishing rainfall, advancing with tactical spacing rather than convoy configuration. Vega adapting to the disruption, implementing dispersed approach to reduce vulnerability. Contact imminent, Marcus reported. Approximately 5 minutes to engagement zone. Acknowledged, came the sheriff's response. All positions confirmed ready. First light crept across the eastern ridges, illuminating a landscape transformed by violence and natural fury. The storm had passed, leaving behind swollen creek beds and mud-slicked slopes. Steam rose from sun-warmed surfaces, creating an ethereal mist that hung between the canyon walls. Marcus stood on the community center roof, surveying the aftermath. 6 hours had passed since the cartel's final retreat. 6 hours of tense vigilance, anticipating a counterattack that never materialized. Now, in the golden light of dawn, the full scope of their unexpected victory became clear. Sheriff Garza joined him, coffee mug in hand, exhaustion etched in the lines of his face. Border patrols established positions at all main entrances to the valley, he reported. FBI Tactical Response Team arrived 30 minutes ago. They're processing the abandoned vehicles now. Marcus nodded, eyes still scanning the distant canyon where the confrontation had reached its climax. The engagement had unfolded with unexpected effectiveness. Cartel forces channeled into prepared defensive positions, their technological and numerical advantages negated by terrain knowledge and strategic preparation. Vega had adapted quickly, demonstrating the tactical flexibility of his military background. But each adaptation encountered another layer of prepared response, another unexpected obstacle. The cartel commander had eventually recognized the pattern, not random resistance, but coordinated defense in depth, designed by someone with professional expertise. Casualty assessment. Marcus asked quietly. 2 deputies wounded, both stable, Garza reported. 4 civilian defenders with minor injuries. All evacuated civilians accounted for and returning. He paused. Cartel losses estimated at 6 wounded, 2 confirmed fatalities. They evacuated most casualties during their withdrawal. The numbers represented remarkable restraint given the intensity of the engagement. Marcus had designed the defensive plan specifically to minimize lethal force while maximizing disruptive impact. The objective had never been body count, but strategic effect, demonstrating that controlling Cielo Vista would extract unacceptable cost. Vega, Marcus inquired. Withdrew with the main force, the sheriff confirmed. FBI believes they've abandoned the entire operation. Too much attention now. Federal response activated, media coverage beginning. The shadows they operate in have been illuminated. Below them, the town was coming back to life. Civilians emerged from secured locations, checking on neighbors, assessing damage, reclaiming their community. The invisible bonds of shared experience strengthened with each interaction. Handshakes lingering longer, conversations more earnest, mutual support more openly offered. Crisis had transformed a collection of individuals into a unified community. They'll need this, Marcus observed, watching the spontaneous cooperation unfolding across town. Recovery takes longer than resistance. Garza studied him with newfound understanding. You've seen this before too. Not just the fighting, the aftermath. Marcus nodded, memories surfacing of Afghan villages where his ranger unit had helped establish security after Taliban influence had been temporarily pushed back. The pattern was universal, the immediate unity of crisis gradually tested by the grinding challenges of rebuilding. The real work starts now, he acknowledged. Rebuilding supply lines, establishing security protocols, creating early warning networks. And your role in that? Garza asked carefully. The question hung between them, carrying implications beyond the immediate tactical situation. Marcus had revealed capabilities during the confrontation that transformed his position within the community. No longer just the reliable delivery driver, but someone with profound expertise in security operations, expertise now visibly valuable to Cielo Vista's future. Before he could respond, Ellie appeared at the rooftop access door. "Doc Jensen's back with the medical evacuees," she announced. "Town hall meeting in 30 minutes. Community leadership wants both of you there." The meeting convened in the same community center where Vega had delivered his ultimatum the previous day. The contrast was striking then, a community under threat, facing isolation and extortion. Now, a gathering of citizens who had defended their home against overwhelming odds, emerging victorious but sobered by the experience. Mayor Hernandez called the assembly to order, the usual formalities abandoned in favor of direct engagement. "First, thanks to everyone who participated in our community defense. Particular recognition to Sheriff Garza and his deputies, who coordinated our response with minimal preparation time." Applause filled the room, genuine appreciation rather than political courtesy. And to Marcus Reeves, the mayor continued, gesturing toward where Marcus stood unobtrusively near the rear exit, whose expertise proved decisive in protecting our community. The applause redoubled, accompanied by calls of gratitude from those who understood the full extent of his contribution. Marcus acknowledged the recognition with a simple nod, uncomfortable with the attention but accepting its necessity for community morale. "We've received official notification that federal authorities have established security around our valley," Mayor Hernandez continued. "Los Aguilas cartel elements have withdrawn from the region. Their attempt to establish control has failed completely." Relief washed visibly through the assembled townspeople, tension held for days finally releasing. Spontaneous conversations erupted as people processed the news, sharing experiences from the confrontation, recounting moments of cooperation and courage. Doc Jensen raised his hand, bringing focus back to practical concerns. "What about supply lines? We've got patients needing medication, businesses requiring restocking. Federal escorts are being arranged for emergency supplies," the mayor responded. "Regular transportation should resume within 48 hours, once security sweeps confirm all cartel elements have truly withdrawn." Marcus listened as the discussion transitioned from immediate crisis response to recovery planning. The community demonstrated remarkable resilience, focusing on practical solutions rather than dwelling on grievances or fears. Plans emerged for strengthened communication networks, community watch programs, infrastructure improvements to reduce future vulnerability. When the formal meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by townspeople offering personal thanks. The gratitude was genuine but discomforting. He'd acted from professional instinct rather than heroic intention, applying learned skills to a tactical problem. "You've got a permanent place here," Luis the mechanic told him, clasping his shoulder. "Whatever you need for that truck of yours, parts, repairs, on the house from now on." Similar offers came from others: meals at the diner, discounted supplies, assistance with property maintenance. The community was incorporating him more deeply into its structure, strengthening connections that had been casual before the crisis. Sheriff Garza eventually rescued him from the well-meaning crowd, guiding him outside where the afternoon sun had burned away the morning mist. They walked in companionable silence toward the clinic, where Marcus was due for follow-up treatment of minor wounds sustained during the confrontation. "They're going to mythologize what happened," Garza observed as they walked. "Human nature, transform complicated reality into simple narrative." The delivery driver, who became warrior protector. Marcus understood the psychological mechanism. Communities needed organizing stories, especially after trauma. The narrative provided meaning, structure, reassurance in the face of chaos. "It's not accurate," he noted. "They defended themselves. I just provided technical guidance." "Technical guidance that saved lives?" Garza countered. "Don't minimize what you contributed, Marcus. But also don't let their gratitude trap you in a role you didn't choose." The insight revealed the sheriff's perceptiveness. The community's legitimate gratitude carried implicit expectations that Marcus would continue in the protector role, remain permanently available for security concerns, transform completely from delivery contractor to guardian figure. "I'm not staying permanently," Marcus stated, testing the assertion even as he spoke it. Garza nodded, unsurprised. "Figured as much. Men with your background rarely settle completely. Too much restlessness. Too many places you feel responsible for." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Marcus had never intended Cielo Vista as permanent residence, just another temporary stop in the rootless existence he'd adopted after leaving military service. The connections formed here were stronger than most, but the pattern of movement remained ingrained. "Doesn't mean abandonment," Marcus clarified. "Supply contract remains active. Regular deliveries will continue. An occasional security consultation?" Garza suggested with knowing expression. Marcus acknowledged the proposition with a slight nod. Balance seemed possible, maintaining connection without complete transformation into something he wasn't prepared to become. At the clinic, Doc Jensen was treating injuries sustained during the confrontation, his examination room crowded with community defenders bearing minor wounds. The doctor's expression brightened upon seeing Marcus. "Perfect timing," Jensen called, waving him forward. "Just got word from regional medical. The diabetic patients are stable. Insulin arrived exactly when needed. 6 lives saved by your delivery run, Marcus. 6 families still whole because of what you did." The concrete impact landed differently than abstract appreciation. Names and faces attached to the outcome: 11-year-old Sarah Martinez, elderly Hector Gonzalez, for others whose medical conditions had made them uniquely vulnerable during the crisis. Not theoretical success, but specific human continuation. "Just doing the job," Marcus responded, the practice deflection automatic. Jensen shook his head, unwilling to accept the minimization. "The job was delivering supplies. What you did went far beyond that." He gestured toward the waiting patients. "These folks weren't part of any contract. Neither was organizing our defense or putting yourself at risk repeatedly." Before Marcus could respond, the clinic door opened and Mike Danvers entered, now wearing official Border Patrol tactical gear rather than civilian clothes. The friends exchanged nods of recognition before Mike addressed the room. "FBI's requesting statements from all participants in the defense action," he announced. "Particularly interested in documentation of Cartel tactical capabilities for their ongoing investigation." The room's atmosphere shifted slightly. Official processes intruding on community recovery, necessary but unwelcome reminder of bureaucratic realities. Mike sensed the reaction and raised a reassuring hand. "Just procedural," he clarified. "Nobody's in trouble. This is about building the federal case against Los Aguilas leadership. You're all considered cooperative witnesses." As the others processed this information, Mike moved closer to Marcus, speaking quietly. "They're particularly interested in your statement. Tactical assessment of Vega's operation, professional evaluation of capabilities demonstrated. Classified background complicates official testimony," Marcus noted. "They're aware," Mike confirmed. "Special handling protocols in place. This goes beyond local incident. Intelligence indicates Los Aguilas is expanding paramilitary capabilities throughout the region. Your observations could be significant." The broader implications weren't surprising. Vega's operation had demonstrated sophistication beyond typical cartel activities. Training standards, equipment quality, tactical doctrine, all suggesting evolution toward more militarized structure. The pattern matched developments in other criminal organizations transitioning toward insurgency models. "I'll provide technical assessment," Marcus agreed. "Operational details only." Mike nodded understanding. "That's all they're asking." "And Marcus?" He paused, expression shifting toward personal concern rather than professional collaboration. "The attention this incident has generated, it creates potential vulnerability. The warning didn't need elaboration. Marcus had operated under restricted personnel classification during certain Ranger deployments. Actions here had created public visibility, potentially compromising that protected status. Operational security now required careful navigation of the aftermath. Understood, Marcus acknowledged. Minimizing profile. The clinic door opened again, admitting 2 FBI agents in tactical gear. Their bearing immediately identified them as former military, the subtle indicators of shared background recognizable to those with similar experience. "Mr. Reeves?" the lead agent inquired, eyes finding Marcus with the practiced assessment of professional threat identification. "Special Agent Harmon, FBI Tactical Response. We'd appreciate your insights on yesterday's encounter." The debriefing lasted 3 hours, conducted with professional thoroughness in a private room at the sheriff's office. Marcus provided detailed tactical assessment while avoiding operational specifics from his military background. The FBI team demonstrated appropriate security protocols, recording only unclassified information while maintaining verbal notes for sensitive details. By late afternoon, federal presence in Cielo Vista had expanded significantly. Border Patrol established permanent checkpoints at main access points. FBI evidence response teams processed abandoned cartel vehicles and equipment. Homeland Security representatives arrived to evaluate infrastructure vulnerabilities. The valley that had stood isolated against external threat just 24 hours earlier now hosted representatives from 5 federal agencies. Immediate security ensured through overwhelming government response. Marcus observed the transition from the periphery, maintaining low profile while completing necessary coordination. His truck had been recovered and transported to Louis's garage for repair. The remaining medical supplies had been properly distributed through Doc Jensen's clinic. Administrative details of his supply contract had been updated to reflect recent events. As sunset painted the western ridges with golden light, Marcus found himself drawn to the overlook where he'd first spotted cartel surveillance 3 days earlier. The valley spread below, Cielo Vista visible as a cluster of lights beginning to illuminate against the gathering darkness. Sheriff Garza's truck appeared behind him, the sheriff emerging with 2 coffee cups in hand. He offered one silently, joining Marcus at the guardrail. "Federal response complete enough for you?" Garza asked after several minutes of companionable silence. "Comprehensive," Marcus acknowledged. "Standard overcompensation after initial failure to intervene. They'll maintain presence for a few weeks," the sheriff predicted. "Then gradually withdraw as media attention fades. Leave us with promised communication protocols and emergency response plans that look impressive on paper." The assessment aligned with Marcus's experience. Government agencies excelled at crisis response, but struggled with sustained engagement, particularly in remote regions deemed low strategic priority. "Community needs to maintain its own security awareness," Marcus noted. "Self-reliance remains essential." Garza nodded agreement. "Already in progress. Volunteer communication network establishing. Regular security briefings planned. Citizens more engaged than before." The transformation extended beyond formal security arrangements into community psychology. Shared threat and coordinated response had created new connections, strengthened existing relationships, established common purpose where individual concerns had previously dominated. "Your supply runs will look different now," Garza observed. "People will see you differently." "I know," Marcus acknowledged, accepting the inevitable evolution. His carefully maintained boundary between professional service and personal connection had been irreversibly crossed during the crisis. "That doesn't have to be negative," the sheriff continued. "Finding purpose after military service, it's not always straightforward." Speaking from experience, Marcus considered this perspective as darkness settled completely over the valley. The lights of Cielo Vista glowed more prominently now, a constellation of human presence against the vast wilderness. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Marcus guided his repaired truck along the familiar canyon road. The evidence of conflict had been largely erased, abandoned vehicles removed, impromptu barriers dismantled, shell casings collected by FBI evidence teams. Only subtle indicators remained visible to trained eye. Disturbed earth where defensive positions had been established, repair work on damaged guardrails, fresh gravel covering bloodstained soil. The valley itself had healed more quickly. Flash floods from the storm had scoured many traces away, nature reclaiming the battlefield with characteristic indifference to human conflict. New growth already sprouted in rain-soaked soil, green life emerging from ground contested just days before. Border Patrol maintained a checkpoint at the canyon entrance, but recognized Marcus immediately. The agent, a young woman with the alert posture of recent academy training, waved him through with respectful acknowledgement. Medical supplies for Doc Jensen, Marcus confirmed as he passed. Already cleared, she responded. Safe travels, Mr. Reeves. The formality of Mr. Reeves, rather than casual acknowledgement, reflected his altered status. Word had spread through official channels. The delivery driver who had organized successful resistance against cartel incursion. The details remained classified, but the essential narrative had taken hold. Cielo Vista appeared on the horizon, its familiar outline now carrying different significance. No longer just another delivery stop on his regular route, but a community where his actions had directly preserved lives and independence. Connection ran deeper now, responsibility more clearly defined. As he approached the town limits, Marcus noted significant changes. New security cameras monitored the main access road. Communication antennas had been installed on several buildings. Civilian volunteers wearing community watch vests conducted patrols with professional bearing. The informal security network discussed during crisis had manifested with impressive efficiency. Doc Jensen waited at the clinic's loading dock, expression brightening as the truck approached. Right on schedule, he called as Marcus parked. The consistency is appreciated, especially these days. They unloaded the medical supplies with practiced coordination, the doctor checking inventory against his order sheet. Insulin reserves fully restored, he noted with satisfaction. Regular deliveries resumed to all patients. Advisory protocols established for potential future disruptions. Community adapting well, Marcus observed. Better than expected, Jensen agreed. Crisis reveals character, both weaknesses and strengths. We discovered more of the latter than the former. After completing the delivery, Marcus drove to Ellie's store for the regular resupply order. The mood inside was noticeably different. Customers engaged in more substantive conversation, cooperation more evident in small interactions. Community bulletin board now dominated by security planning and communication network information. Ellie greeted him with the same practical efficiency as always, but added a gesture that would have been uncharacteristic weeks earlier, a brief but sincere embrace. The regular delivery schedule restored some normalcy, she explained, releasing him with slight embarrassment at the emotional display. People needed that consistency after everything that happened. By sunset, Marcus had completed his deliveries and started the return journey through the canyon. The western sky blazed with spectacular color, illuminating the rock formations in vibrant orange and gold. He stopped at the Overlook W. Here he'd shared coffee with Sheriff Garza, allowing himself a moment to appreciate the landscape that had transformed from ambushed terrain back to natural beauty. His satellite phone vibrated. Mike Danvers with the weekly security update. Los Aguilas leadership has officially abandoned expansion operations in your region, Mike reported. Intelligence indicates Vega has been reassigned to their southern territories. Your demonstration made quite the impression. Community demonstrated its resilience, Marcus corrected. With some professional guidance, Mike added knowingly. Border patrols maintaining the checkpoint for another month, then transitioning to random patrols. FBI believes the cartel's written off Cielo Vista as too high cost for limited return. After ending the call, Marcus remained at the Overlook, watching darkness gradually claim the valley. The lights of Cielo Vista emerged like earthbound stars, human presence asserting itself against the gathering night. The cartel's defeat was undeniable, though some questioned the extent of Marcus's actions. Most celebrated the powerful message sent: America does not bow to intimidation. Marcus, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing his duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. His story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.